Hello, everybody. Welcome to our How to Be Open for Institutions and Open Infrastructure workshop. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to wait on a few more participants to join us, hopefully. So we're just going to give them a few more minutes to jump in. In the meantime, please feel free to introduce yourselves on the chat. Let us know who you are. I'm already seeing a couple of familiar names in the list of participants. So thank you for our usual suspects for joining us. But for those of us who don't know each other, please do feel free to introduce yourselves. I'm Nahil Nassar. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Form, and I'm going to be moderating today's event. So I think we'll just wait for just another minute before we get started. But yeah, please do introduce yourselves. We'd love to know who you are and where you're coming in from. Don't be shy. Please do. We'd love to know at least, your institution, why you're interested in today's workshop. It's really important for us to know also like who we're engaging with on a day-to-day basis that we can support your needs better. So please don't be shy. There we go. Okay. I think we'll just get started and people can swiftly shuffle in as they come through. Welcome. Today's workshop is titled How to Be Open, Open Infrastructure for Research and Scholarship. It's our last How to Be Open workshop of the year, though we're going to have more for sure coming for 2025. We're finalizing the program now. And this one is geared more towards institutions, but there's a little bit of something for everyone, I think, anyway. So just before we get started, I just want to run through a couple of housekeeping points. This is a meeting format because we do want to try and facilitate interactivity between our speakers and ourselves as well as our audience. However, out of respect for our speakers when they're presenting, please do keep your cameras and your microphones off. If there is an opportunity throughout the workshop for you to share your thoughts or your opinions with us, our speakers will let you know that you can turn on your microphones. Generally, we request that you keep your cameras off unless otherwise instructed. But if there's an opportunity to share your thoughts with us via microphone, our speakers will let you know. The next point is that we know that our audience is multilingual and English might not be a first language for everybody. So if you do feel like we are speaking too quickly, please do just use the raise hand feature and that will indicate to me or to our speakers that we're speaking too quickly and we'll slow down. Again, since this is a meeting format, there is no Q&A box. So the chat that we have that I've just asked you to introduce yourself on, please do use that to give us any indication of any technical issues you may be having, but also if you have any Q&A or questions related to content, or if you just want to start a dialogue about what you're hearing, please do throw that into the chat. We'll do our best to monitor it and make sure that none of your questions get missed. And finally, our speakers will be using Menti polls today. So just keep your eye out for the code that you'll need to access the Menti polls, and I'm sure our speakers will give you a heads up for that as well. Just very quickly before we get started, just a few words about the forum for anyone who is new, who we don't know, and is joining us for the first time. So we're Form Initiative, which stands for the Forum for Open Research in MENA. We're a not-for-profit membership organization that supports the advancement of open science policies and practices throughout the Arab region, in research communities and in institutions. And we do this through 4 main pillars, which is that we support the advancement of open science ecosystems in higher education and research. in whatever way that we can. We create localized and accessible resources relating to open science policies and practices. We encourage collaboration between community partnerships or partners, and we really try to develop this sense of community and cooperation between our members. And finally, we hope to begin slowly championing the development of right-to-left functionality in key open source and open science technological solutions. And more specifically, what we do is we have three main pillars. We have the annual forum, which is our yearly conference that we host across the Arab region. We have a different country every year. We actually just wrapped ours up just under a month ago in Doha, in Qatar. And we're hoping to announce the 2025 conference very soon. So please do keep your eyes out for that. As I mentioned, we also produce resources. We do that we have a journal that we've just released, Al-Wusul journal, that we're hoping to finalize the first issue of very soon. We also offer translation for our members and our strategic partners. And then we also produce our own open science resources that we will be uploading very soon onto the website, probably the next few days. And then finally, of course, is our CDAs, community development activities, such as the one that we're in today, where we host workshops, webinars. We also are working on working groups as well and symposiums, and we'll be, as I mentioned earlier, releasing the 2025 program of events very soon. They're all free online and obviously open access for everybody. And that's a little bit about who we are. So without further ado, I'll now be passing over to our workshop facilitators of the day. We have Jerry Salanga and we have Emmy Tseng, both from Invest in Open, who are going to be giving us I'm so sorry, I hope I said your names right, by the way. But they're going to be giving us a really interesting and in-depth insight into some practical tools and resources we can use in the world of open infrastructure when it comes to research and scholarship. So please go ahead and let's get started.
Thank you so much, Nahil, for the invitation and the introduction there. And it's really lovely to see everyone this morning, afternoon, depending where you are. I am Emmy Tang. I am the Director of Finance and Operations at Invest in Open Infrastructure. And joining me today in facilitating this next hour and a bit is Jerry Salanga, my colleague and the Engagement and Communications Coordinator at Invest in Open, or IOI, as we call it in short. And I'll introduce Invest in Open Infrastructure in a moment. Following that, we will be introducing open infrastructures and why you would want to consider adopting them personally and at your institutions, some of the latest developments in the open infrastructure space that I think are really interesting to watch if you care about open science. And then we will be introducing Infra Finder, which is our new open infrastructure discovery and evaluation tool. Jerry will be doing a bit of a demo of the tool, and you can also follow along and understand how you can benefit from using the tool and what kind of information you can find about the various open infrastructure options available and how it can address some of the needs that you may have at an institutional level. After that, I think we would love to go into a sort of informal discussion with y'all, particularly around some of the challenges and opportunities that you face in your setting in terms of adopting open infrastructures and some of the opportunities there as well. The session, we really don't want to be speaking for alone for the next hour, and so we would have various points where we would love to invite you to participate and join the conversation, as Nahil was mentioning, through Mentimeter polls. So watch out for the opportunities to scan QR codes or type in the code on menti.com. We'll share the instructions again when we get to those parts. There will also be a bit of exercise in the middle where we'll invite you to play around with Infra Finder, and you'll, have a chance to have some hands-on experience with it and share with us your feedback and thoughts there as well. So lots of interactivity, and we really hope to be hearing from you throughout. With that, we'll get started. So just a few words on Invest in Open Infrastructure. We are a nonprofit initiative. Our mission is to drive informed, strategic, and coordinated investment in and adoption of open infrastructure. And we do that in 3 different main ways. Next slide, please. So how we're seeking to achieve our mission, first of all, we have a core program called the Data Room, where we are looking to do research and use that research evidence to build tools and products to help support decision makers like yourselves at institutions, at policymakers, etc., in adopting, developing, and investing in open infrastructure for research and scholarship. Our second core program is around our strategic support services. So these are really targeted partnerships with open infrastructures and also with adopters of open infrastructure to implement some of our research recommendations. This could be, working with open infrastructures to build out sustainability blueprints and roadmaps, diversification of revenues, streams, business models, etc., to really look at how we can together build resilience and sustainability for the knowledge sector. And then last but not least, our funding pilots. These are funding programs that we run to test out ways that we can diversify the mechanisms and the sources of funding that is going into open infrastructures. So really looking at how we can catalyze additional investments, for example, from different partners and stakeholders in the broader open infrastructure space, going beyond the usual suspects, etc., to really look at, again, building that resilience in funding for open infrastructure for research and scholarship in particular. Next, please, Jerry. So I've talked a lot about open infrastructure. I've used the word a lot without explaining what it is. So maybe now is a good time to sort of build that shared understanding here. When we at IOI talk about open infrastructure, we really mean the shared research infrastructure that is needed to support open science. So some examples of what we mean by that infrastructure is, for example, open access publication platforms, data and content repositories, scientific data set themselves, and open bibliometrics and scientometric systems, etc. And this definition we didn't invent ourselves. It's very much based on the definition that is in the UNESCO recommendations for open science that was published in 2021. And for those of you who are familiar with those recommendations, you would know that that set of recommendations is really one of the key pieces of a public call for countries and member states to invest further in the development and maintenance of open infrastructure, supporting open science and recognizing the criticality of that infrastructure in advancing the open science agenda movement globally. So that's, we're obviously very happy that at IOI that was part of the recommendations, but we also hope that our work is really helping folks understand how you can do that investment and that adoption in a strategic, informed, and coordinated manner. At IOI, our particular focus is on a narrower set of open infrastructures, particularly around open source solutions, systems, and tools that support the creation and dissemination of open research content and data. Next, please. So, of course, I talked about the fact that it is in the UNESCO recommendations for open science that open infrastructure is really becoming a growing conversation where folks are seeing the advantages of using that open infrastructure. But I thought it would be nice to also outline specifically some of the main advantages and benefits to consider when you're thinking about adopting open infrastructure, particularly at an institutional level. And I would also say that these benefits are, things that we're learning as we are in conversation with the community, as well as through our research engagement efforts. targeted research and engagement efforts into the space. So one of the main benefits that we have sort of confirmed, if you will, is that open infrastructures are open. So this data here comes from our State of Open Infrastructure 2024 report, which we had launched in May. So there we have a chapter called The Characteristics of Selected Open Infrastructure, where we surveyed 57 open infrastructures. And from the responses and the responses that they've given us, we discovered that a lot of the open infrastructures, the majority of them, in fact, have code of conducts, diversity, equity, and inclusivity statements, web accessibility and privacy policies, and other policies that really demonstrate their commitment to community accountability and inclusion. So if you or your institution has the goal of advancing open science and really walk the talk of those open science principles, then using open infrastructures are really aligning quite well with those open goals and open principles. Next, please. Some of the other benefits as well. We see that some open infrastructures can be very attractive to use because of their relative affordability and accessibility. So through one of our funding pilots, the Open Infrastructure Fund, we funded a project by the Africa Open Science Hardware team, where they trained Ghanaian students in using an open source 3D printed microscope called the Open Flexure microscope. And the microscope is a piece of open infrastructure in this case. It's made of 3D printed parts that can be manufactured locally in maker spaces, and that makes it a lot more affordable and accessible than perhaps its commercial counterparts. The other advantage of using open infrastructures is in its adaptability and customizability. So particularly the solutions and systems that are open source, they also often have the advantage of being just more adaptable and customizable. And this allows, for example, institutions to continuously sort of modify and adapt their open infrastructure to suit the growing and evolving needs of their users and their communities. So, for example, I think, Nahil, you talked about at the introduction on adding, right to left script functionalities. These sort of things are easier in many cases to do with, in open infrastructures than with their sort of closed counterparts, if you will. Next, please, Jerry. I also want to take the opportunity to highlight some of the latest developments beyond the UNESCO recommendations in 2021 that relates to open infrastructure, and really, again, reiterate that call for additional investment into and the adoption of open scholarly infrastructure. So here we have the Barcelona Declaration on Open Research Information that was launched April this year, I believe. And there, the Barcelona Declaration really addresses one of the key pieces of sort of open infrastructure in the place in terms of that open research information. Research information is critical to the assessment of researchers in terms of their promotion and tenure cycles. For example, that information basically helps guide a lot of those decisions currently. And the problem that the community have noted here is that we are often making those decisions using closed research information, which are essentially black boxes that are non-transparent, and we ended up really not knowing how we are actually assessing researchers and how they are, whether or not that information in those systems are fair. So by using open research information and open research information infrastructure, we have an opportunity to change that. We have an opportunity to address some of the biases that may be in that data and those systems, and to really advance responsible research assessment and to promote open science. And in the declaration, which is now signed and supported by over 100 institutions and organizations worldwide, they have clearly noted that there is an urgent need to make research information openly available through open scholarly infrastructures, and have called for signatories to commit to investing further in developing and sustaining those infrastructures. Next, please. And the other piece of recent development that I would highlight is stemmed from the Global Diamond Open Access Summit that took place in Mexico, Toluca, last year in October. And again, in the exploration of, a more equitable, sustainable model of open access publishing, the key stakeholders who were present at the summit and continues to be part of that growing conversation really noted the importance of facilitating interaction and collaboration amongst non-commercial agents, scientific publishers, publications, and open infrastructure, and the importance of that towards building an ecosystem of public goods. So really thinking about how infrastructure and open infrastructure in particular can help sort of build towards more equitable models of open access, knowing that open access currently, is not necessarily aligned with some of the values and principles of openness that we were hoping to see when open access was first talked about and advanced maybe some decades ago. And now there really feels like there is really momentum and conversation around to hoping to change some of that narrative and business models in this space, and the recognition that open infrastructure is going to play a critical role in that conversation and that advancement to make open access and publishing in general more equitable for the entire world. So with that, I am going to hand over to Jerry to to first hear from y'all about, some of the infrastructures that you are using, and also wanted to understand a bit more your considerations behind how you're thinking about the adoption of open infrastructure. Jerry.
Great, thank you, Emmy. One of the things that we would want now to do in this next section of this particular discussion would be to kind of take this one step further and kind of try to understand some of the motivations, some of the tools that you're already using, but also we are going to do a run through of an open infrastructure tool that we have developed called Infra Finder. But first, I would want to kind of get your perspectives, and for this particular exercise, I would kindly request you to go to menti.com. As you can see it on the screen, menti.com. Then you can input that particular code, because we would want to understand what are some of the infrastructures that you currently use in your work. You can also just scan the QR code that you see on the screen. That would take you directly to this particular screen, where you can be able to give us feedback on what are some of the infrastructures that you use in terms of your work. So as Emmy had mentioned earlier in the description of open infrastructures, these are just shared services that are used in the academic life cycle. So in terms of, we're looking at publishing tools, repositories, bibliometric tools, scientometric tools. It could even be in terms of tagging tools. So particularly within your institutional setting or your workflow, what are some of the tools that you use? For example, this could be a tool like, let's say, DSpace, or it could be something like Web of Science, so Google Scholar. So what are some of the tools that you currently are using within your workflow? I'm not yet seeing any results on the screen. Kindly go to menti.com, input the code on the screen, that's 25877270, and then you can give us your feedback, so that this at least will give us a foundation for the next chapters in our discussion. Great, I can see Google Scholar, SciSpace. This is great. Keep them coming, keep them coming. We can see a Dataverse, ACSS Dataverse, SciSpace. Keep them coming. So far, it seems we only have 2 respondents. Yes, DSpace, PubPub, ORCID, which is a persistent identifier system. PubPub is publishing software. Google Scholar, DSpace. Then we also have another entry for ORCID, which is quite cool. Perhaps maybe we can get to maybe 10 and then we can move on to the next question. But you can already from here start to kind of see the diversity in terms of tools that are used. Here we have databases, we have equipment. Yes, that also could be is part of the research infrastructures that we have. I would want to move on to the next slide, where we would be looking at what are the main considerations that you use when you are choosing infrastructures in your work. So what are some of the things that you consider in terms of choosing infrastructures? So same workflow that we had mentioned earlier, the code is still the same. You can be able to input your answers now to this particular question, and then the results will pop up on the screen. Keep them coming. We don't have any responses yet. Cost. That always is a big one. It needs to be cost effective. I think the second response is also cost too. Efficiency, very, very important. I think we can, interoperability, extremely important, particularly within the landscape of open integration. I think that ties in quite closely to interoperability. I think let's wait till we get to 10, so keep them coming. Cost or user friendliness, that also is important, because you can't be able to get buy-in if the platform that you're using is not user-friendly. Ease of use, I think that ties in quite nicely with user-friendliness. Can we get some 3 more responses, and then we can move to now the Infra Finder walkthrough. Getting work done, so that more or less means is a dimension of efficiency and ease of use, and then reliability and availability. I think those both are very crucial points. You don't want to get an infrastructure that always will be having downtime, and you always have to now consult the IT folks to kind of help you to fix it back up. I think with those particular responses, now we can get back into our discussion. And one of the things that when we were developing this Infra Finder tool is we actually had done a lot of engagements with researchers, librarians, the people who are actually kind of involved in this science and scholarly kind of communication ecosystem. And one of the things that we found out was that finding the right infrastructure is a hard and slow process. So we discovered information related to pragmatism matters most overall, and this includes cost, as you saw in the Menti exercise that we just did. That cost is actually a big consideration when someone is looking at onboarding or adopting an infrastructure. So this is in terms of how much will this cost me in dollars or in whichever currency that you're using, and how much is it going to take me in terms of time to install, maintain, and upgrade the infrastructure? We are also looking at the aspect of de-risking, because when you are investing in a particular tool or platform, we also want to make sure that it is a tool that is able to be cost effective in the long run, and also there's not great risk in terms of I'm the only person who is using a particular tool, so if something breaks down, can I have a community of support that can help me to kind of to troubleshoot or to make sure that the tool is working correctly. Then we're also looking at dependencies and interoperability, and I think this is something that we also had seen from the Menti exercise. And when you're looking at interoperability, there's always other systems and other softwares that we have. Particularly, it could be, let's say, learning management systems in an institutional setting. Can that be interlinked with that? What other thing does the infrastructure need to run? Will this also coexist with some of the systems that I already have? And also, can this infrastructure further the aim of openness, which includes equitable access? Because as we mentioned, we are talking in the domain of open infrastructure. So can this be able to further that kind of objective that we have as an organization or as a team? So the problem that we had when we were doing this kind of focus groups, surveys with the stakeholders, the research community, librarians, and all of the other kind of stakeholders that we had, is we realized that when it comes to open infrastructure discovery, there's a lot of scattered information that is in different places across the web and different forums, and none of that information is consolidated in one place, which makes it difficult to make a decision. There's different requirements and different needs for different institutions and stakeholders. So for example, you would be looking at a big university, a well-resourced university. Their needs and requirements would be completely different from, let's say, a much smaller university or a college. And that means that their requirements might not necessarily fit together. And also due to the fact that there's kind of this diversity of information that's scattered and the different requirements and needs, it's very time consuming to pull together all of this information in a centralized place and for you to explore these different options. So one of the things that we had done is earlier this year, we came up with a tool called Infra Finder, which I will demonstrate shortly. And one of the things that we were looking at doing with Infra Finder is to helping the broader scientific community to navigate the complex landscape of open infrastructure services and standards that enable open research and scholarship. So one of the key things that we are looking at having in Infra Finder, and that's one of the USPs, the unique selling points of this particular tool, which is completely free, is that you are able to get up-to-date and verified information on infrastructure. So we work very closely with infrastructures that are listed in Infra Finder to ensure that there's continuous updates to their data in Infra Finder. And also we are looking at having key information all centralized in one place. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, one of the challenges was that this information was very scattered on the internet in different forums. And here with Infra Finder, you can actually be able to look at these different infrastructures and actually be able to get all of the different parameters that are important to yourself as an institution. And then finally, we also have an easy to use and comparison view. So you can actually be able to compare up to 4 different infrastructures in Infra Finder. And that allows you to actually now make very educated decisions when it comes to what would be the best tool for you. So Infra Finder is a tool that was created with the community. We did not do this in isolation. As I mentioned earlier, we did over 40 user research sessions where we were kind of trying to refine Infra Finder's utility, kind of trying to look at what value is it going to add, addressing the pain points that were given to us in those particular interviews. And then also we want to be very explicit in acknowledging that Infra Finder is inspired by and built upon existing resources and work. So for example, there's a number of different tools that were developed before, and Infra Finder is kind of learning from those tools and taking this a step further. So for example, there's the SCOMCAT, which is the Scholarly Communications Catalog, which was an index of open infrastructures. There's Helios, there's Re3Data, there's fairsharing.org, and all of these were inspirations that we utilized when we were developing Infra Finder. And then finally, we are taking a launch and learn approach. One of the things that we are very cognizant of is that when you're launching a tool, there's a process of iteration and feedback from the community in terms of what do we want to see, what is in the tool, how can we be able to improve that, and this is an approach that we are taking. Actually, even last week, we just launched another update that was informed by some of the feedback that we've been getting from our community. So Infra Finder, in terms of its usage, we launched this at the end of April this year. So far, we have had over 8,000 visits, 20,000 page views from over 90 countries in the world. As you can see here on the map, we have a number of countries in the MENA region that also are utilizing Infra Finder. Of course, we would want to build on top of additional infrastructures within the region. So that also would be interesting to look at adding those infrastructures from the Middle Eastern region. And then in terms of our most viewed solution page, so far this has 635 views. So perhaps here at this moment in time, I would want to maybe give a little bit of a demonstration of Infra Finder, which is what we have on my screen at the moment. Let me just maybe make my screen a lot wider. And now this is what we talk about when we talk about Infra Finder. As you can see at the moment, we have 94 different infrastructures that span different topical areas. So for example, if you were to come to the solution category, we have tools related to annotation, authoring, library systems, DMP tools, that's data management planning tools. We have digital preservation, open access or subscription management tools, persistent identifier services. So literally we have a quite broad categories of tools that we have here. And perhaps maybe let me just demonstrate with one of these tools. So let me take Open Library. If I click on Learn More, then now you can actually be able to see information about this tool. So for example, here you have a bit of historical context about this particular tool when it was launched. We have when the tool was updated, the categories that it fits in, a little bit of an about information. And then when it comes to the mission, key achievements, the technical attributes, so when you're talking about the open code repositories, the technical documentation, all of this information is here. So we tried to really be comprehensive in the type of information that we showcase here. And if I go back to solutions, you can actually be able to now filter by these different parameters that we have put on the left-hand side of the screen where we have the filters. So for example, we have, let's say I want to look at infrastructures, maybe let's say with an open API. I can just click on open API and then I click on update results. And now you can see it has shifted from 94 tools to 60 tools. And so you can also be able to now, even if you want to do an additional filter, let's say you can add, they need to have technical documentation, then you can update your results. And then now it's moved from 60 to 59. If you want to reset, you can just clear all, and then you can actually be able to get back to the default state, which is 94 solutions. I also wanted to maybe just give a brief overview of the compare function. So for example, if you want to compare different structures, you can actually be able to do that. You would just come to the compare button here, and then you can now be able to come and add another tool. So for example, I have the open library, and then I can come and add the research resource identification initiative. I can come and add another tool that's thought open metadata, and then you can even add up to 4. So let's also add 30. Then once you click compare, this would take you to a new window that would juxtapose all of these different tools. So for example, you now can be able to compare them according to their technical attributes. You can now be able to compare them according to their community structures. You can be able to compare them according to their policies and governance. And a really cool tool that we also is have the this someone else in and they can also be able to save this exact view, and they can actually be able to see the different infrastructures that you're comparing, and that will help a decision. Maybe I think that we want to just show that there's also compare application feature. Internet is acting up, is very slow. Yes, but if you go to the solutions category, there's I think given the fact that my internet is slow, I can just showcase this through here. So if you're to look at the place that's highlighted in with the yellow bounding box, you can actually be able to the solution according to country, and that's more or less designed to make this whole process a lot easier. Yes. So now I would want to hand this over back to my colleague, Emmy, and then we can take it from there.
Thanks, Jerry. So thank you, Jerry, for walking us through Infra Finder. And now it's time to try and use it and see if we can understand better how it can help address perhaps some of our questions or things that we need to do as, whether you are institutional leadership or, librarians, for example, looking for infrastructure that will meet your needs, or you have a couple of infrastructures in your mind and you want to be able to compare them and evaluate them. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I've laid out a couple of sort of small exercises that if you follow along, will hopefully get you a better understanding of what InfraFinder can do. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is to head to infrafinder.investinopen.org, and I'll put that into the meeting chat as well, so you can click on it quite easily. And there you should be able to see what you're seeing on my screen now. If you use that link, that is InfraFinder's main landing page. And so we will go through sort of 3 different use cases or scenarios. And essentially, these are questions that we'd love you to use InfraFinder to try and answer and see if you can answer them. So sorry, I'm hearing a bit of someone maybe trying to speak. Just pausing there in case someone would like to ask the question out loud. You can always put your question in chat as well. I'm happy to address that. Okay, but I'll go on for now. Yeah, so let's say your institution, our institution, is looking for a data management planning tool or service to recommend to our researchers, and would like to recommend an open source solution because we care about open science and open principles. So using InfraFinder, can we find examples of such tools or services that we can recommend to our researchers? So head over to infrafinder.investinopen.org and try and use some of the filters as a hint to see if we can find data management planning tools or services that are open source. I'm going to give folks maybe a minute or two to try and do this. And then if you have identified those solutions using InfraFinder, if you can share maybe 1 or 2 names of those solutions in the chat so that we know that you have been able to find the answer. Thank you for the question there. Is there any open sources for systematic review like Covidence or Ryan? happy to check and come back to that. The top of my head says these are not solutions that are in Infra Finder yet, but these are great suggestions. We'd love to be able to include them. So I'll mention how infrastructures can be added into Infra Finder as well in a minute when we wrap up the exercise here. But thank you so much for the suggestion there. Those are great suggestions. But in terms of data management planning tools and services that are open source, did we manage to find them? If you have found the solutions, please do put some recommendations for our researchers in the chat. I'm gonna give folks maybe another 20, 30 seconds. And then I will also walk you through the ML. Okay, thank you very much. For that answer. iRods, Renku. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Well, feel free to continue to try this out. I'm going to also show Infra Finder here, and hopefully you have done something quite similar to what I'm about to do. So thank you, Kariman. Yeah, that's a tool to do research data management. Maybe I am actually curious if we already have that one in Infra Finder. If not, again, would love to be able to add it. Okay, so here's Infra Finder. In order to find data management planning tools, I would first head to the filters over here, click on the solution category filters where you can find our different types of open infrastructure solutions that are available in Infra Finder currently. And we see the box for data management planning tool or service. That's the one we want. So I check that box there. And then specifically, because we wanted open source solutions, I'd also want to click on the open attributes and filter the list by open source software so that I only get the open source options. And once I have checked these boxes, if I click update results, then you will see, indeed, we have iRods and Renku. So that was also mentioned in the chat, and also Nada, who mentioned Arch's Heritage Data Management Platforms. That's the other solution that we currently have on Infra Finder. So it looks like we don't have DML yet. And we would love to be able to add it. And I would, as Jerry has mentioned, we don't have everything in Infra Finder at the moment, but we're certainly enthusiastic and keen to continue to expand it. So this is a great suggestion, and I would, again, go back to how you can nominate or add an infrastructure to Infra Finder once we finish these exercises. So awesome. Looks like we have understood how we can use Infra Finder to do that particular task. Our second use case here, potentially, let's say my institution would like to use an open repository software, but we currently don't have the capacity to maintain our own instance. We don't have the technical staff, for example, to be able to set up our own instance on our own servers and maintain that in the long term. So I'm really looking for repository software that offers hosted options with third-party vendors, or they themselves are have a hosted offering that is available to user. So how can I use Infra Finder to find these repository software options? This is perhaps a little bit less intuitive, I think, but nevertheless a fun challenge. So if you would like to go to infrafinder.investinopen.org, thank you for that feedback, Nada. if you would like to go to infrafinder.investinopen.org, and then again, little hint there is this still has to do with the filters. How can we find the repository softwares with the hosted options? And what are some of those examples? If you found them, please share them in the chat so that we know that you have successfully found them. I see Fedora coming up. Thank you. Is there any tools for learning management systems for open researchers? I don't think learning management system is a category in Infra Finder yet, although, as I've said, we'd love to expand it. So it's definitely on the roadmap there. We recognize that LMSs, learning management systems, are really a critical part of the services and tools provided by institutions to their researchers. So definitely would be interested in including some of those in Infra Finder. My core. Fabulous. Thank you for that. All right, giving folks another 20 seconds or so to continue to find the infrastructures in Infra Finder. Thank you very much for that suggestion, Salah. Have we managed to identify more repository software with hosted options, either through a third-party vendor or providing hosted options themselves? Okay, I'm gonna head over to Infra Finder. Now, I've done my last search, so I do need to first clear this search here before I can do a new search. So I'm gonna click clear all here on the left-hand side in the filter screen. And then you will see that loading, and we're now back at the landing page with all 94 solutions. Then we were talking about finding repository services, repository software that have hosted options. So solution category we're interested in is repository software. And then we want to scroll all the way down on this list. Let's make my window a little bit larger. To hosted options. Then I was kind of trying to drop some hints there. We're interested in hosting options, regardless of whether or not it's through the solution of third-party vendors. So I'm going to check this last box over here. And then again, click update results. And we've got two solutions, at least here. We've got DSpace and we've got Archipelago Commons. Now, some of you have identified additional solutions that may be possible. And because if you check all three of these boxes, I believe, then you will also, let me see if I can do that. Yeah, you will see more solutions coming up because this is based on the reporting data from the infrastructures themselves. And so, by clicking all three of these, actually, this will give you all the options that have hosted option either through solution only or third-party vendor only or solution or third-party. So that was a bit of a trick. And y'all are very smart and managed to navigate through that. So again, you can find also more information about the hosting options by clicking into the Learn More page of one of these solutions. So for example, if you're curious about Fedora in particular, you can hit Learn More over here and then use this top menu to scroll down to, I've got to remember myself as well. I think it was somewhere, some of you may be faster than me here. Yes, here. Sorry, so that was under technical attributes. You'll see that there are hosting options are through third-party vendors only. For some of the solution, you'd be able to find links to the page where there are the recommended community service providers. I don't remember exactly which one has one. So if some of you have bumped across it in your navigating of Infra Finder, then please do share it with, the participants here as well. But yeah, if you're clicking to learn more, you may be able to find more information about the specific hosting options. I see a question: how can the data journal support the open review for researchers? Maybe we can, that feels like a bit of a digression from the current exercise, so I'm going to leave that to after we finish the exercise and come back to that. Thank you so much for that, though. All right, so thank you so much for playing along. You've all done fabulously so far. So let's go to the last little exercise here. This is a multi-part question. And feel free to sort of answer one or three of them. If you are now very proficient with Infra Finder, I'm confident that you'd be able to get through it in a few minutes. But let's say I'm comparing different digital preservation services. I'm curious about what preservation standards they usually use. Maybe working at my institution, we also need to align with our procurement process, and that requires that we identify solutions that have a privacy policy. So which ones out of the digital preservation services that are on Infra Finder currently have a privacy policy? And then the last question related to this particular scenario, let's say we currently use DSpace, some of you do, as per that first section of this section. And we would like to find a preservation service that integrates with DSpace. Which one does? So lots of questions here, but the answers should all be available in Infra Finder. And let's see if we can find it collectively. So if you do find the answers to one or two or all three of these questions, please do share them in the chat. It's a little bit more involved. So here, once again, interested in digital preservation services. Then we're looking for information about their preservation standards, whether or not they have privacy policies, and the integrations. How do we find this information in the fastest way to identify the services that would meet our needs? If you know the answer to any of these questions, please feel free to share them in the chat. I see clocks coming up. Thank you for that. All right, gonna give folks another 20, 30 seconds to go explore Infra Finder and find the answers that we are looking for. And as you go through, I'd love to hear, as you are browsing through that information, how you see that information could be useful for your own use case. What kind of questions can it help answer in your day-to-day? Now the open API. Interesting. Yep. Some of these do have open APIs. Indeed. All right. Once again, I'm going to navigate to Infra Finder. So I'm going to clear this page of results from my last search. And then we were looking for digital preservation services. So let's hop over to our favorite filters and pull out all the digital preservation services over here by checking this box. I'm going to update these results. Now this has returned 4 different solutions: DuraCloud, Clocks, AP Trust, and PKP Preservation Network. Now, how do I quickly identify which ones of them have, for example, a privacy policy, or what kinds of preservation standards they use? Because we have 4, and as Jerry has shown you, we can compare 4 solutions in one screen. So I'm gonna need to go ahead and do that and put all of these 4 solutions into the comparison screen by clicking this compare button on each of the boxes. And you will see them all appearing in this bottom menu bar. I will now click compare. And I have one screen that shows these 4 solutions side by side. So all of the information is now in one page and can be accessible at a glance. So I was looking for, hang on, I have to remind myself, preservation standards that they use. Hopefully that information is available somewhere here. You know, I'm not going to scroll through this list and just do a quick search on the page, preservation standard. And here we have preservation standards indeed. And you will see that 3 of the 4 solutions, so Clocks, AP Trust, and the PKP Preservation Network, uses OAIS as their preservation standard. There's no information from DuraCloud's site on Infra Finder. So 3 of the 4 solutions uses OAIS. What about privacy policy? That was part of our procurement process. Which of these solutions have privacy policies? So let's scroll down to policies and governance. And you will see that in the privacy column, privacy policy row, that Clocks and PKP Preservation Network both have a privacy policy, while AP Trust and DuraCloud do not have one yet. And then the last question was, we use DSpace in our institution and would like to find a preservation service that integrates with it. So which of these services integrate with DSpace? We would need the integrations of these services. And if I scroll back up to integrations in this row, you will see the integrations that these 4 solutions have. And DSpace, DuraCloud integrates with DSpace. Maybe Clocks too, because it says here an array of publishing and hosting platforms without much further information. But at least in this view, it's a little bit hard to tell directly. And this is indeed, you know, one of the current limitations of Infra Finder, where the information that we have is a collaboration between the infrastructure and our own team. And we do verify that information, make sure that they are up to date, but it ultimately depends a little bit on the information that is provided by the infrastructure teams themselves. So in the future, we hope to be able to do more work around standardizing some of the responses that infrastructures will be giving into Infra Finder, so that we can make that information more readable, more comparable, etc. But that's definitely, you know, a thing that we're working towards. You can always click in to learn more, for example, for Clocks here, to go into the detail page. And again, that information may be available on the website, which is accessible here from one click. So that also helps, hopefully, help users find information more quickly in general. Not to mention OpenAPI. So I'm going to just head back to the comparison here quickly. You can also see that on the comparison view here across the 4 solutions, there are 2 of them that has OpenAPI, DuraCloud and AP Trust. while the other two currently do not have an open API. So that's information that you can quite quickly find as well. All right, I hope that gave you a more concrete sense of how you can use Infra Finder to help find information quickly and compare solutions, identify solutions that meet your needs. Would love to go back to address some of the questions that you have and also hear your feedback on how you have found the experience. Could you find the information that you are looking for easily? What would make Infra Finder better and what else you would like to see? I will also note that when I was in Infra Finder, I very quickly glossed over the pop-up that was on the screen. That actually is not spam, hopefully. We really would love your feedback. So if you want to, you can either tell us here, by typing in the chat, or in the second, I'll also ask you all to unmute if you would like to do so. But you can also, if you want to play around with Infra Finder for a bit longer before you leave the feedback, you can always use the in-app survey, the blue pop-up that you saw briefly on my screen to give us that feedback. And I promise it is 1 minute long, less than 1 minute probably. So one of your questions that were coming through the chat was, can we find X type of infrastructure in Infra Finder? Can we find this infrastructure in Infra Finder? And I was saying that, not always. Obviously, we don't have everything at the moment. But if you would like to add an infrastructure, on Infra Finder, on the top menu bar here, there is a button called Add an Open Infrastructure. Here, it will give you more information about how an infrastructure can be added. I mentioned already that we work with the infrastructures themselves to be able to compile the information on Infra Finder and to make sure the information is up to date and verified. So it does require that the infrastructure team themselves is willing to be added, if you see what I mean. So if you are running, developing, or maintaining an open infrastructure, please do express your interest in being included in Infra Finder. If you are using an infrastructure and you would like to see it in Infra Finder, I think the best thing that you can do is to write to the team that is hosting or running, developing that infrastructure and tell them about Infra Finder, ask them to express their interest in joining Infra Finder. Because again, it's one of those things where we have to work with that team to be able to get the information into Infra Finder. So please do reach out to your favorite infrastructures team and say, hey, there's this app called Infra Finder. We'd love to see you on there. Maybe you want to check it out. The other way to do that is to, use the pop-up in-app survey or give feedback over here, which will lead you to a form that you can suggest additional infrastructures to be included as well. And our team, when we can, we do sometimes review those suggestions and see if we can reach out to them with an invitation to participate. That depends a little bit on our team's capacity, but that's certainly one way to do it as well. And that also includes adding additional solution categories. Can you share the contact information if we want to add an infrastructure to Infra Finder? Yeah, so you can send this page. I'm going to copy this link into the chat with your favorite infrastructure team. Or if you have any sort of suggestion or feedback, I would strongly encourage you to use the give feedback form over here. Hope this works. I haven't clicked it for a while. But yes, I think, yeah, there is a way to offer feedback over here, and you can say, I would like to include infrastructure name, and we can see what we can do there. Thank you for that. Hopefully that was clear. There was a question on data journals supporting open review for researchers. If you want to elaborate on what you mean by data journal, I'm going to assume that these are journals that publish data. So if not, please tell me. I think there's a lot of opportunities where data journals can support open review for researchers. Obviously, it depends on the individual publishers as to whether or not that's something that they want to do. But we have various review related infrastructures currently on Infra Finder. If a publisher, hang on, just going through and clearing the search here so that I can show you. If a certain publisher or someone who is running journal infrastructure is interested in integrating those peer review solutions with their journal workflow, journal infrastructure, then you can use Infra Finder to identify some of those review services, peer review systems. Exactly. So if I click peer review systems here, then you will see a number of them, and they're all a little bit different. So you can always sort of use the comparison function or dive into each of the individual pages to learn more about these systems and what they can do. Yeah, I think that would be my infrastructure take on that question. Let me know if I have interpreted the question correctly. All right. I'm just going to pause here and see if anyone would like to unmute and talk about your experience using Infra Finder, or suggestions or what you would like to see to make Infra Finder better. I am currently not seeing any sort of unmuting activities. So I'm going to leave the invitation open. If there are feedback that you're currently typing, please do continue typing in the chat. If you are still pondering over what the exercise that we've just gone through and thinking about what you would like to see in Infra Finder, again, your feedback is always welcome and always very helpful to helping us improve Infra Finder and shaping it in a way that it's actually make it helpful for you all. So please do use our in-app survey and that's a blue big pop-up box that you will see when you go to Infra Finder. Fill it in, and we'd love to hear from y'all. And yeah, or use the feedback form on the top menu as well. There's plenty of ways to give us that feedback, and we'd love to receive it. So please do continue exploring the various functionalities and infrastructures through Infra Finder and let us know how we can make it more helpful. With that, I am going to hand back over to Jerry.
Thank you, Emmy, for that interactive session, and also thank you to the participants for your engagement in that particular exercise. We really appreciate it. I think as we go towards the conclusion of this particular session, one of the things that we wanted to kind of do is to have a bit of an interactive exercise where we can be able to have a engagement from yourselves to kind of understand what are some of the challenges and the opportunities that are facing are hindering open infrastructure adoption within the Middle Eastern region. And this full disclosure is the fact that myself, I'm based in Africa, Emmy is based in Netherlands. I think in this particular instance, there's already some research that we had done about this, but of course would always be interesting to get the lived experience of all of the participants on this particular call. So with that, I would want to ask you to go back to the Menti code that we had shared earlier. That's menti.com, and then you can use the code that you see on the screen. And perhaps maybe it would be interesting to just maybe get some sampling of feedback in terms of what do you believe are some of the challenges that are facing open infrastructure adoption in the Middle East. So here we are looking at what are some of the barriers that you face, and these may be systemic, it may be institutional, it may be related to very unique contextual factors that hinder the adoption of open infrastructure in your particular region. And in this kind of context, also, we are looking at, there's a lot of proprietary infrastructure that we use, which is very common. But when you're looking at the specific area of open infrastructure, what are some of the challenges that you see that are blocking the investment and adoption in open infrastructure within the Middle East? I'll just give maybe like a minute for this particular section. And then also we can move on to now to the next bit. Funding, awareness, interesting. This is cost is always a big challenge, particularly when you're looking at shifting over from proprietary to open. We have another one called expertise. So this one is now related in terms of actualizing or operating a particular infrastructure. There's an element of trust. So yes, that makes a lot of sense, particularly when there's a trust deficiencies that exist, lack of standardized best practices. So I think this is more related to the coordination aspect. Cost is similar to funding, and then customization for Arabic. Yes, yeah. I think this is quite an important point. Right to left, I believe, is related to non-customization for Arabic. So thank you for this particular feedback. I'd want to move on to the next question that we had. I'm going to have additional. No, what did I do? Yes. What are the opportunities facing open infrastructure in the Middle East? So what are some of the areas where you see an opportunity that could be leveraged to advance open infrastructure? In the previous slide, we're looking at the challenges. Now here we want to maybe understand what are some of the opportunities that you see that could be exploited when we're looking at advancing open infrastructure use in the Middle Eastern region. I believe that some of these points had already been referenced in the earlier slides. Support from IOI and scores. Yes, that's important, particularly when you're talking about joining up with other people who have shared value systems. I think that could be important because no one walks this particular journey alone. So of course, there's going to be support that's needed that could either be technical, financial, in terms of knowledge. So those dimensions. Other responses, please. Keep the responses coming. So far, we only have one response. Perhaps maybe I'll just give another 30 seconds for this particular bit so that then we can move to the other slides. Keep them coming, folks. We still have one. What are the opportunities that you see that we could be able to use to advance open infrastructure in the Middle East region? Collaboration with other regions, that's very important in terms of that element of cross-pollination and learning from what other particular people who maybe either more advanced in terms of using open infrastructure, I think that could be quite important. I think perhaps maybe in the interest of time, then I can go back to the slides. And one of the things that we had seen particularly, which also correlates to some of the things that you had mentioned, I believe that there was a call out to the fact that there was a big challenge when it comes to open infrastructures. And one of the things that from the research that we had done is that when you're looking at the Arab states, only 12 states actually have open access to open access publishing platforms. And that potentially is an indicator of a wider issue with awareness. Funding limitations is always going to be a big challenge because, for example, one of the things is in any kind of society, there's always going to be competing priorities. There's healthcare, there's agriculture, there's business, and all of these things are competing priorities. And so how do we now get, particularly when you're looking at the governments, the science networks and research to actually be able to invest more in open infrastructure? Then the other issue would be in terms of policy gaps and regulatory barriers. So in a lot of, particularly in Africa, Latin America, even in Asia and the Middle East by extension, we still do not have specific policies that would actually advocate and promote for the issue to do with adoption of open infrastructures and open science in general. So that's a big challenge. Then the digital divide and infrastructure challenges here, we're just talking about the equipment that is potentially needed to be able to implement and use open infrastructure. Then we also have linguistic and cultural barriers, which I believe in this particular context is very important, because when you look at the dominance of the English language and also when it comes to the research outputs, that is a big challenge. And I believe one of the responses we had received from the participants is there's no right to left kind of translation of materials that would be conducive to the Arab region. So that is a major barrier in this particular context. Then also we're looking at regional collaboration. So how can we be able to learn across nations and across continents and regions? And that still is something that needs a lot of improvement. And also one of the things that is there is how can we be able to now make these different regions work together better. The opportunities here that we see from our analysis is that there's a growing interest in open access. For example, just by having this particular forum, it shows that there's interest in open science, open infrastructures, open access. There's also a very youthful tech-savvy population. There was this report that I referenced from the Arab Barometer. And actually, one of the things that in the MENA region, actually, the average age is 22. And this means that there's a very kind of young tech-savvy population that potentially, if given the right resources and platforming, potentially would be interested in advancing open infrastructure. And also we now have the emerging local and regional networks keen on open infrastructure. So for example, the work that the team at FORM is doing by convening this kind of platform. We had the FORM summit last month, the convening in Qatar that also brings people together. We also have other networks like ASREN, the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. You have the Open Science Community associations in a number of Arabic countries. And then also we have global open science and open infrastructure policy initiatives. So as we had referenced earlier, there's the UNESCO recommendations on open science. And one of the things that that particular policy document did is it made it a lot clear on the need to invest in open science and open infrastructures. But even very specific to this particular region was the call out for multilingualism in science. And that means that potentially more resourcing or more of a incentive for people to actually translate science materials into other languages, including Arabic, then one of the biggest things that is as an advantage for open infrastructure and open science is the fact that by going the open route, you then have the ability to kind of develop custom solutions that are suited to a particular context, to a particular region. And finally, also, there's an increased kind of global emphasis on research transparency and integrity, which now potentially would incentivize institutions or networks to invest in open infrastructures. So I wanted to kind of summarize the whole discussion on challenges and opportunities with this particular slide from our partners, Open Science Community in Saudi Arabia from Batul. And this particular visualization for us, it represents some of the things that we believe are important for us to actually be able to develop open infrastructure use and adoption. So one of the things that you can see here is there's the element of awareness creation, which we cited as a challenge, but then here we are looking at how can people now be able to be taught about the basics of open infrastructure, what are some of the tools that they need, and that's a continuous aspect of growth. And important in that particular piece of growth is also the element of networking, so that sharing of knowledge and resources, which is also tied very closely towards the sharing of best practices. And then once we do all of these different things, then there's going to be the opportunities that arise out of this embracing of open infrastructures and open science. And underpinning all of that is the element of community. As you can see with this particular engagement, the FORM team is trying to foster a strong community that can be able to support each other and work with each other as we proceed with this journey of open infrastructure adoption within the Middle East. So finally, I would want to bring to your attention that if you want to get updated on the work that we are doing in terms of open infrastructure, investment and adoption, I'd welcome you to scan this particular QR code that you see on the screen. This will take you to our newsletter subscription, and you can actually be able to sign up there, where you can be able to stay up to date to all of our updates on some of the work that we are doing with regards to Infra Finder in terms of funding of open infrastructures, and also in terms of sharing our knowledge through strategic support for different communities and networks in the world. As we come to a close, we would want to appreciate all of you for participating in this particular discussion. And of course, let's keep the conversation ongoing. Emmy's email is there. My email is also there. And we would love to kind of keep the conversation ongoing with all of you. Thank you for for your attention throughout this past 1.5 hours. And we look forward to questions, comments, or additional feedback that you may have. So with that, I would like to now hand this back over to Nahil for the conclusion of this wonderful session that we've had.
Thank you guys so much. Wonderful is the perfect way to describe it. It was very thought-provoking. It was very insightful. I've learned a lot, and I hope and I'm sure that a lot of our attendees did too. Unfortunately, because we're supposed to actually be wrapping up in just 1 minute, we don't have the time to completely open up for questions. But as Emmy and Jerry have just said, if you do have any questions for them, you can always reach them by email. I don't know if you guys maybe want to put your emails into the chat while I close off the session so that people can reach out to you if they want. So before everyone goes, just quickly, I wanted to let you all know that Forum has one more workshop left for the year, and it's going to be tailored to people who are interested in starting a open access journal. And it's going to be all about the why and the how. So why should you do it and how do you do it? So if you're interested in registering for it, please do jump on to our website and do that. Registration is still open until the last day. It's going to be held, I believe, December 19th, but I'm pretty sure 19th, but maybe just like double check on the website. And then I also want to encourage anyone who isn't already on our Slack community, if we can move on to the next slide, do join us. We try our best to keep you all engaged, if not informed, about forum's activities. It's also a great way to get to know fellow open science advocates or anyone who's also in the field. You can direct message people, you can engage with us in a more group format on our channels. So if you're interested, please just email us at our contact inbox and we'll add you to the community. And finally, which I think many people are waiting for, if you're interested in receiving a certificate for attending this workshop, you just have to fill out, I've written worksheet, but I meant survey. We have a quick little survey just to get your thoughts on how the workshop went, what you may suggest that we do better, what you thought went well, and suggestions you might have for future workshops as well. Gives us a great idea of what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, how we can better support the community. Once you complete the survey, you'll then be given a link that will redirect you to a quick form to fill out, and that's how you'll get your certificate. And with that, we're going to wrap up. Thank you again, Jerry and Emmy, so much for today. The recording for this will also be uploaded in the next week-ish, is our usual goal. And you'll be able to access that on our website as well. I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute to give everybody a chance to scan the QR code. But otherwise, I hope you have a great day or that you end your day very well, depending on where you are in the world. And we'll see you next month, hopefully. Bye, everyone.